From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. Oh my God, just a terrible couple of days here. I gotta share something with you before we start the show. A few days ago, I got angry with a friend. And I was harsh and, it was inappropriate. I just shouldn't have talked to this person the way I did. I got angry and I got really inappropriate. But I didn't really realize the extent until a few days later when this person called me and told me how angry they were at me and how hurt they were and how inappropriate I was and how kind of crazy I was. And I just felt terrible. While the initial fight was happening, I don't know if you call it a fight, I was kind of yelling at this person. They weren't really fighting back. But anyway, the initial incident, I wasn't hearing myself the way my friend was hearing me. And this is a friend. This is somebody I love. And it wasn't until several days later when they told me what they heard. That's not what I heard while I was speaking. There's often that disconnect. What you think you're saying isn't necessarily what the other person is hearing. So once I found out how much I had hurt this person, I was just mortified. And I apologized, and I've had literally a knot in my stomach ever since. And my mind is just awash in this. It's like I can't think of anything else. It's kind of why I wanted to share this with you, because it's going to impact everything I do now. I don't know how this episode is going to go. I'm preoccupied with it. It's all I can think about. I go out of my way to read and, watch television, anything that'll try to take my mind off of it, and I can't. And like I said, I got this physical knot in my stomach ever since that just won't go away. Oh, I just feel awful. I just feel terrible. And whatever I can do to repair this, I don't know if it can be repaired. This person was really upset with me. And I don't really blame them. Like I said, once I understood what they heard as opposed to what I thought I was saying, I take full responsibility. I really screwed up. And man, I hope this can be repaired because I love this person. So wish me luck on that front. And the other reason I bring it up too is because I think I've said this before on the podcast, but it's a good time for a reminder. If you ever catch me giving any kind of personal advice, interpersonal communications, relationships, kind of personal psychology stuff, because I try really hard not to ever go there. Because even before this incident, I've always known I'm a very flawed person. I would never in a million years try to give you advice on what you should do in your relationships, about your own personal psychology. Oh my gosh. I'm as screwed up as anybody, probably way more. And in my experience, everybody's screwed up in some, in their own individual way. We've all got our problems. And I'll tell you the truth, I get pretty annoyed at amateurs giving this kind of advice about relationships and psychology. And of course it's important, but when my analysis turns into something that sounds like advice, I make a pretty big effort to keep it on a kind of political, cultural, detached, not personal level. Because I am the last person in the world you want to get advice from when it comes to interpersonal stuff. And I would venture to say most people giving you this kind of advice are unqualified to do it. We're all screwed up. Again, me as much as anybody, or maybe more than anybody. So if you ever catch me breaking this rule, please tell me. Please tell me. And I will I'll make the appropriate adjustments. All right, let's get into the show. Well, this is actually, I guess, maybe a little bit related. I saw a post from a social media friend, and I'm not sure how this was intended. It's one of these little pithy pieces of advice. And it reads, "You don't have a right to the cards you believe you should have been dealt. You have an obligation to play the hell out of the ones you're holding." All right. This is something we see a lot. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Play the cards you've been dealt. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is the kind of thing I hate. If it's personal advice, I'm not sure how this is intended. If it's personal advice, kind of self-help, psychological advice, then screw you. Don't be giving people personal advice. Everybody has their own set of issues. Everybody has their own problems. Everybody was raised differently. You don't know their story. This is why I don't give personal advice. And I kind of resent it when people do. You don't have a right to the cards you believe you should have been dealt. You have an obligation to play the hell out of the ones you're holding. So a person who was abused doesn't have a right to believe they were dealt a bad hand? Sure they do. I mean, you could think of a million examples. I dislike this quote so much. You don't have a right to the cards you believe you should have been dealt. Well, sure you do. Everybody has a right. You have a right to all the basics you and I always talk about, to food, to shelter, housing, education, health care. You have those rights. And everybody has the right to a safe and psychologically sound upbringing. And maybe you didn't have that. So screw you, whoever wrote this quote and shared it. But again, I don't know their intention. Maybe their intention is more political in nature. You don't have a right to the cards you believe you should have been dealt. You have an obligation to play the hell out of the ones you're holding. So, okay, that means work within the system. If this is a political statement, I disagree with it as well. Because in this little metaphor, the cards you've been dealt are the system. It's the world we live in. You just have to do your very best under the rules that have been provided. Well, in this metaphor, the cards themselves, the game itself, is what I'm fighting. The game is rigged. The game is bad. The game is world corporate capitalism. So yeah, one argument is, okay, well, that's the world we live in, so I'll just do my very best under those rules. Or I could whine and complain and fight about the rules. The game itself. I don't want to play this game. I'm playing a game I never voluntarily signed up for. The game being, the current set of rules. So I really dislike this quote, however it's intended, either as kind of a personal self-help advice or if it's some kind of a political statement. I dislike it equally on both grounds. Okay. Speaking of pithy little posts I saw, from a friend of mine posted this. Police only solve 2% of major crime, and yet so many Americans are terrified about criminals running wild if we have less cops. It's ironic that the fear of crime is keeping us from actually addressing the root causes of crime. Now, as you can imagine, this is something I generally agree with. But the problem is, this is more in the nature of posts. Oh man, when you share something like this, please include a link. I can't take this at face value. I don't know if it's true. If you just, people post these as photos. It's a screenshot. It's a pic capture, whatever they call it, of some little tweet or post or something. Give me a link. Police only solve 2% of major crimes? Can that be true? Again, I agree with the sentiment about the nature of crime and policing and root causes. So I'm sympathetic to this idea. But that can't be right. Well, I looked it up on Snopes. They don't really analyze it, but they do share an article. I didn't know Snopes did this. I guess maybe this is something they started to do. This article is republished here with permission from The Conversation. The content is shared here because the topic may interest Snopes readers. It does not, however, represent the work of Snopes fact-checkers or editors. So just to be clear, they didn't fact-check this, but they did share an article published in August of 2020. And according to legit research that they cite here from University of Utah, the writer is from University of Utah, professor of criminal law, Shima Bowman. But according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, and this goes back to 2006, so it's a little while ago, but this isn't the kind of research you can do annually. Anyway, in that year, out of all serious crimes reported to the police, only 4.1% of cases ended with an individual convicted in the wake of a reported crime. Now, you take into account the fact that research also tells us that only about half of major crimes are even reported. So half of 4.1 is about 2%. So according to this research, that seems pretty legit. Yeah, police only solve about 2% of major crimes. So this whole ridiculous debate, oh my God, people just went nuts about the phrase, can we just get past language? Defund the police. We all know what that meant. Okay, so the phrase was easily misconstrued and easily manipulated. Yes, that's a problem. Linguistics and politics are bound whether we like it or not. So I'll admit there was a language problem, but let's get past it. Can we just be honest? Crime has root causes, and we all know what they are. It's the basic social safety net. It's education. It's health. It's jobs. It's lack of opportunity. And those are the causes of crime. And to just put more police on the street, as they're promising to do in New York, as they're promising to do here right outside my window in Milwaukee. I don't have it in front of me, but you and I talked about some research, a while ago, a few months ago, that showed that by and large, more cops does not reduce crime. It really depends on the situation. If it's a big city or a small city, if it's a high crime city or a low crime city. Depending on those variables, more cops will sometimes help a little, will sometimes actually hurt a little. And in the end, it's pretty much a wash. More cops are not the answer. But anyway, if you hear this 2% claim, it's I've checked it. The source I got looks pretty legitimate. Yeah, I found this hard to believe as well, but yeah. They solve 2% of major crimes. Statistics show about 4%, but only since half of major crimes are reported. There you go. So enough with this more cop stuff. I saw an interesting article in The Atlantic. Is America really running out of original ideas? The nation's crisis of originality isn't in our minds, but in our markets. By Derek Thompson. And full confession. I suppose I'm sharing this with you because it reaffirms something I already believe. So I guess I'm as guilty as anybody about this. But he makes a pretty good case, this guy. He's a staff writer for The Atlantic and kind of a cultural critic. And he's written about the kind of the slowdown of progress in the U.S. Culturally, I mean, films aren't as great as they used to be. There's kind of a slowdown even in the progress of science, infrastructure development. He quotes a paper that says new ideas no longer fuel economic growth the way they once did. So this is something he's thought about and written about for a long time. And in collecting criticism of his own work, he's amending his thought a little bit. He says, no, America isn't exactly running out of ideas. It's just that they have nowhere to go. One of his critics said, you suggest that the problem is invention, but I see no evidence that people are less ingenious. I see the problem as moving their genius into the world. And by moving their genius into the world, that means finding opportunity for it. Where can you sell it? Reading from the article, what exactly does that mean? It means that the fault is not in our minds, but in our markets. And there it is. There's the bottom line. Whatever good idea you have, if it's for a Hollywood movie, if it's for a new innovation in science or technology, the markets have to accept it, or it's going nowhere. Talking about movies here, he's using this as one example of a larger issue. These market shifts have created a self-perpetuating cycle. American moviegoers ignore well-reviewed original movies without CGI, since many of them reserve their few annual movie tickets for stories they already know. Movie studios both respond to this audience behavior and drive it by investing more heavily in action-packed franchises, validating and deepening the audience desire for explosive sequels. Thus, the box office has been transformed by market dynamics from a showcase of original storytelling to a destination for new installments in familiar franchises. He goes on to talk about science in the same way. It has to meet the demands of the market. Any scientific technological advances, if they can't turn a profit, if they're not popular in the market, they're going to be stifled. So, he makes the same case for science and technology. And I think you can really apply this to almost any innovative thinking, whether it's culture, art, science, technology, labor issues, the whole world of economics, the eternal fight here of the classes. Whatever advance we think we can make have to happen within the realm of capitalist markets. So, one of the main selling points of free market capitalism is that it fosters innovation. But from this point of view, and I think he makes a pretty good point, the exact opposite is true. It hinders innovation because you can't think long term. You can't have any revolutionary aspect to what you're doing. It has to turn a profit. He talks specifically about movies, science, and tech. I think a really important element to toss in here is the media. When it's controlled by a handful of companies, and what we know and what we think we know and what we're exposed to has to fit within this very limited paradigm. Not that they're ideological overlords sitting in some high office somewhere deciding what we can and cannot see. No, it's on the lower floors where the accountants are. They know what sells and doesn't sell, and they're the ones deciding what we see in a very sort of innocuous way. So anyway, if you're interested, it's just a short article from The Atlantic. Is America Really Running Out of Original Ideas? By Derek Thompson. I just thought I'd share that with you. What else has come across my eye recently? I guess this is kind of good news. on the climate crisis front. But boy, I'll be the first to admit, I have a hard time with science writing. But I guess the gist of this, I'll give you the headline. It's from the Washington Post just recently. How a little discussed revision of climate science could help avert doom. We can reduce global temperatures faster than we once thought if we act now. Just let me read you the first couple paragraphs here. One of the biggest obstacles to avoiding global climate breakdown is that so many people think there's nothing we can do about it. They point out that record-breaking heat waves, fires, and storms are already devastating communities and economies throughout the world, and they've long been told that temperatures will keep rising for decades to come, no matter how many solar panels replace oil derricks or how many meat eaters go vegetarian. No wonder they think we're doomed. But climate science actually doesn't say this. To the contrary, the best climate science you've probably never heard of suggests that humanity can still limit the damage to a fraction of the worst projections if, and we admit this is a big if, governments, businesses, and all of us take strong action starting now. For many years, the scientific rule of thumb was that a sizable amount of temperature rise was locked into the Earth's climate system. Scientists believed and told policymakers and journalists, who in turn told the public, that even if humanity hypothetically halted all heat-trapping emissions overnight, carbon dioxide's long lifetime in the atmosphere, combined with the sluggish thermal properties of the oceans, would nevertheless keep global temperatures rising for 30 to 40 more years. Since shifting to a zero-carbon global economy would take at least a decade or two, temperatures were bound to keep rising for at least another half-century. But, all right, listen to this now. But, guided by subsequent research, scientists dramatically revised that lag time estimate down to as little as 3 to 5 years. Okay, did you hear that? It was 30 to 40, and this estimate is now 3 to 5. Reading again. That is an enormous difference that carries paradigm-shifting and broadly hopeful implications for how people, especially young people, think and feel about the climate emergency and how societies can respond to it. This revised science means that if humanity slashes emissions to zero, global temperatures will stop rising almost immediately. To be clear, this is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. Global temperatures also will not fall if emissions go to zero, so the planet's ice will keep melting and sea levels will keep rising. But global temperatures will stop their relentless climb, buying humanity time to devise ways to deal with such unavoidable impacts. In short, we are not irrevocably doomed, or at least we don't have to be, if we take bold, rapid action. All right, so this definitely caught my eye. This is important information to know. 30 to 40 years locked in of a global temperature rise? Nope. As little as 3 to 5. And again, the bad news, we have to act now, which seems impossible, but we got to keep fighting. And the other caveat here, it doesn't mean that temperatures fall. No. Temperatures are still high, melting still going on, but it is a much more optimistic scenario than that 30 to 40 years. And it does buy us some time. And I hear myself say that phrase, and I regretted it immediately. I don't want to give anybody the idea that we have any time. We don't have any time. But this is good news. This is good news. Now, good news, bad news, we have to act now. We continue to act, Anyway, I thought that was definitely worth sharing with you. And frankly, I wish, that story was buried in the middle of much more timely stuff There are issues of war and peace and Washington, D.C. headlines every day, every single damn day. And climate crisis, you got to almost go searching for it. And I guess the editors agreed with me that's a headline that's worth at least running within, it was somewhere among the top stories. I didn't have to search too deeply for it. But mostly you have to actively go out and search for any climate news. And, I guess that's understandable. It's the very nature of news. It's got to be new. It's got to be new primarily is the word embedded in news, of course. And climate crisis is a slow-rolling story. Whether you're covering the doom side of it, all the bad news of the horrible things that could happen, or the other side of, okay, these are the possible solutions. How do we get there? This is where the hope lies. Either side of the story you're covering, it's not like a daily headline. It's always going to be in the middle of the pack at best, and on the back pages normally. I just really wish we could do something about that. Covering climate crisis as a journalist and seeking it out as a citizen, both sides of the equation, climate crisis news should be like brushing your teeth. It's something we should do every single day. It's something we should maintain every day. I mean, you can't just occasionally cover the topic or as a reader, as a citizen, read about it. That's like saying, well, I brushed my teeth 2 weeks ago. I'll brush them again in another 4, 5, 6 weeks. No. It's an everyday thing. Did you brush your teeth today? Did you cover climate change today? Did you read about climate change today? And, it's not so outrageous. When it comes to the news, we cover the weather every single day. We get weather reports. We get sports scores. We get stock market reports. There are things that we update every single day of the week. Journalists cover it. It gets into our eyeballs and into our heads, and it's right in front of us. They get headlines. If you watch the nightly news, whether local or national, you're going to get that stock market report. So there's no reason we can't do it. It's doable. Every single goddamn TV news report, every single front page, every one of them ought to have a little climate box there. Let's see it. Let's see the latest. We just got to get this into our heads. It needs to be a permanent part of our everyday experience. Just like we get the stock market report, whether we want it or not, there it is. It's right there on the front page, or if we're watching the news, they're gonna tell you what it is. Just like we get the sports scores, whether you want them or not, there they are. Just like we get the latest shooting in your nearest city. There's stuff we get every single day. I don't know. I don't know why we can't do it. So, there you go. Wish me luck. I wish you luck. And I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.